In my childhood, people have this image of, oh, childhood is this magical, carefree time when everything is just fluffy Easter bunnies and candy, lollipops, and fluffy and cotton candy and all. Everything is just cartoon, Dora Explorer, Dora, and everything is just your whole child is running around, screaming like a little animal. Which is true for some children. That's what they do. They spend their childhoods every day running around screaming like little animals and crying their heads off when they don't get their candy right away. And this is what our notion of childhood is supposed to be. That's not what my childhood was about or like. I was every bit as much the intelligent, if you what you call it, adult person. My personality was just every bit as much what you would think of as adult today. But I was in a child's body, and I was told that I was just a child and I didn't have the ability to make decisions about most things, and I had to do what I was told. But the person inside of me watching this happen was not some little screaming puppy running around like a little animal just crying over, where's my lollipop every day. I was every bit as much the serious, if you could call it serious person that I am today. The only real difference as far as the development of intellect isn't really even the development of intellect. At most, I gained some factual knowledge of a few things. Not very much. When I was 5 years old, I didn't know how to read and write. And now I know how to read and write. That's a factual skill, a factual tool. But the person reading and writing is the same person. And I didn't know how to do algebra or multiplication or division when I was 5 years old. And now I do. Or I know some algebra, at least I understand the concept. But that's just factual information. I didn't know French when I was 5 years old. Now I know a little bit of French. Just a little bit. But it's like just to say, well, because you didn't know these things when you were 5 years old or 8 years old or 10 years old, that made you less of a serious, intelligent person. That's ridiculous. It's like saying that because today I do not know Russian or Chinese or Hindu or Hindi, that I'm less of a serious, intelligent person than people who do know those languages. It's just a factual database in your mind. But it doesn't change the intelligence level of the person having that database. It doesn't change the intelligence level of the mind itself. And this notion that, oh, well, you start as a baby and you have a little blank mind that doesn't know anything, and then you're a little child, and then you're just a little bit knowing, a few little things, just enough to run around screaming, saying, I want my lollipop. And then only when you get your high school diploma at the age of 18, then you become a doctor of thinkology, and the square root of the hypothesis is the square of the hypotenuse and the equal the other two sides, and all the blah blah blah. Just like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, you hand him a diploma, and suddenly he's spouting a bunch of garbage, intellectual nonsense that's supposed to make you intelligent, and it doesn't. And people graduate high school, and they're the same little kids that ran around screaming for their lollipops, but then instead of screaming for their lollipop, they scream for their high school diploma, and then they scream for their college degrees, and they spend their lives running around screaming for their lollipop of one sort or another. I want my Hummer. I want my summer house, and I want my trips all around the world, blah, blah, blah. So I can say, I did this, I did that, I've been there, blah, 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 I got my lollipops. But inside, there's still the same little stupid idiots running around screaming for their fucking lollipops. And inside, I was the same person as a child that I am now. The exact same person. And my voice is just a little bit, only just a little bit deeper than it was when I was a child. But the depth of your voice, that's just a physical thing. That's just exactly like saying, okay, well, anybody who's a child who's 3 feet tall is half as worthwhile or half as valuable as a 6 foot tall person. And then we give growth hormones to people so that they'll be 6 feet tall when they're 8 years old. And anybody who happens to have a different hormonal system, and they end up being 3 feet tall when they're 20 years old, they're only less than half a person. And the thoughts they have inside their mind are necessarily half as good. And that's the same thing when I was a child, as if the thoughts inside my mind were half as good because I was only a child. And as if now my thoughts are only 3/4 as good as anybody else's because I'm only 3/4 as tall as anybody else. And as a child, I was the same person, and the kinds of dreams that reminds me of this is that the kind of dreams that I had when I was a child were just as every bit as heavy, if not heavier, than anything I experience or think today. My dreams as a child were not these fluffy bunny, cotton candy, dancing through meadows bullshit that we're supposed to think children think about. So our perceptions of what a human being is, and that what age does for a human being, I'll tell you what age does. It makes your body grow to a certain point at which it stops. Age makes your skin become a little bit less flexible, less resilient, so that you start getting a few wrinkles on your face. Age makes the hair on your head stop growing and the hair everywhere else start growing. Age can sometimes make your bones feel a little weaker. And that's about it. That's about all that age does. And age accumulates actual experience so that your mind has a database of things that have actually happened to you, things that people have actually said and done to you. And that's all stored, but that's not really a difference of age, that's just a difference of information storage. So that if you could take that information storage and transfer it to a child, they would have that information. And their decisions based on that information would be more or less exactly the same as your decisions at the age of 40 or 60, based on the information stored in your brain. So what we think of when we try to think of a person's maturity and a person's mental age, I think is not really so much about the information, but about the perceptions, the attitude of the person who is. If you see your body as sort of like a vehicle, like an automobile or an airplane, where you're looking out your cockpit or your windshield every time you open your eyes, and you're just gliding through the world in this manner. The person who is the pilot or the driver, the person who is looking out of out of that driver's seat? That's the question. Whether there's any real difference, whether having the experience of your years is not isn't that just sort of like having more controls on your dashboard or the whatever the panel is they have on the cockpit with all the dials and switches telling you what your altitude is and your speed and all this other information? Isn't all the information that you gather through your years merely adding more controls to your dashboard or your cockpit? But whether it actually changes the perceptions of the person in the driver's or pilot seat, that's the question, and I don't think so. I think I was every bit as much the same person sitting in that seat, sitting in the cockpit seat of my body when I was 5 years old, certainly when I was 8 years old, as I am now. I just had more experience spitting out sentences so that when I have a thought and I want to spit it out, I just spit it out. But that's just through the practice, through the habit of putting things into words. So that now I can put things into words without having to pause too often, at least on a certain bit more basic words, and I can just put things into words as unconsciously matter of practice and routine. But I was not less of an intelligent person and not less of a mature person inside when I was a child than I am now.